The United States may have had difficult presidential decades, but it wasn't always that way. There have been a total of 45 presidents since its independence from the British Empire. Let's start from the beginning and see how we got to this point. Widely considered the father of the nation, George Washington was the first president of the United States, a brilliant strategist. He is known for leading the American forces in their war for independence. George Washington's vice president, John Adams, holds the distinction of being the first president to reside in the White House. He never owned slaves despite being a very powerful man. A great thinker and philosopher, Adams was an abolitionist all his life. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, owned a staggering 600 slaves. This was the same man who wrote the Declaration of Independence, which ultimately established that all men are created equal. A curious coincidence is that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died on the same day, on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. James Madison was the smallest president in U.S. history, standing at 5 feet 4 inches and weighing 100 pounds. He was president during the War of 1812, when British forces captured Washington and burned the White House and Capitol. This would be the last time a major U.S. city was captured by enemy forces. James Monroe is famous for his doctrine, which prohibited Europe from interfering in all American politics, including those of South American countries. President John Quincy Adams was the first in many things. He was the first son of a former president to be elected, the first president to be photographed, and also the first president to be inaugurated wearing trousers instead of knee breeches, which was the standard practice of at the time. Andrew Jackson was the first president to be elected by the Democratic Party. He was best known for the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which led to the forced migration and ethnic cleansing of many Native Americans. Martin Van Buren was the first president born after the independence of the United States. He was known for his political skill and was often referred to as the Little Magician, due to his ability to manipulate and organize political factions. When William Harrison took office, he delivered possibly the longest recorded inaugural speech, despite extremely cold weather and freezing rain. Shortly afterward, he developed symptoms of pneumonia and died just 30 days after taking office, making his presidency the shortest in U.S. history. John Tyler's presidency is not highly regarded by historians. He clashed with his own party. He considered wings after becoming president. The party eventually expelled him, causing many conflicts and strained relationships during his service. However, he fathered a remarkable 15 children, more than any other president in history. James K. Polk was a boring president. I mean, to the point of banning liquor in the White House and starting 12-hour work shifts. He was straight-laced, serious, and humorless. However, he expanded the territory of the United States by provoking a war with Mexico and taking 1/3 of its land. Zachary Taylor was a general and national hero. He served in the U.S. Army for 40 years before becoming president. He had little political experience, so he faced many challenges. He served only 16 months before dying of an acute gastrointestinal illness. Miller Fillmore proved that with some competence, even an unaspiring man could achieve the American dream. That's how the official White House website described Fillmore. To be honest, the only thing he's known for is marrying his school teacher, whom he fell in love with. At the age of 12, Franklin Pierce orchestrated a daring escape from his boarding school, embarking on a brave 12-mile trek back home. However, upon arriving, his father forced him to walk back in the middle of the storm. According to Franklin, that was a turning point for his childhood and future career. A lifelong bachelor, James Buchanan is the only president who never married. He was engaged to a woman named Anne Coleman, but shortly after, he called off the wedding due to a fight involving other women Mr. James was seeing. Historians have described the last few presidents as unmemorable, but definitely not this man. His legacy is primarily based on his monumental efforts to abolish slavery. Unfortunately, Lincoln's presidency was cut short when he became the first president to be assassinated. He was the first Republican president and remains the tallest president in history, standing at 6 feet 4 inches. In 1877, Congress passed a law that prohibited the president from removing appointment officials. Despite the law, Johnson fired his Secretary of War the following year. And because of this, the House of Representatives voted and impeached him, making him the first president to be impeached. Ulysses S. Grant's most notable achievement was his effort to suppress the Ku Klux Klan. In 1871, he signed the Enforcement Act, the law that gave the federal government the authority to declare martial law, prosecute criminals involved. Rutherford B. Hayes' election was highly disputed, with both Republican candidate Hayes and Democrat Samuel J. Tilden claiming victory. The situation led to the Compromise of 1877, in which Hayes was declared the winner, but in exchange for concessions to the Democrats. James A. Garfield was the second U.S. president to be assassinated. While preparing to board a train in Washington, D.C., he was shot twice by a disgruntled job seeker who believed the president owed him a government position. Garfield's wounds proved fatal, but it was not the gunshot that caused his death. It was the inadequate and unhygienic medical treatment he received. Chester A. Arthur was known for his keen sense of fashion. He cared greatly about his appearance and was often praised for his impeccable suits. He had a personal valet that owned over 100 pairs of pants. Not much by today's standards, but back then it was a real extravagance. Grover Cleveland, or Big Steve, weighed 275 pounds. He was addicted to smoking cigars and drinking too much beer. Benjamin Harrison was the grandson of the 9th President William Henry Harrison. He was the first president to have electricity in the White House. He was so nervous about the new invention that he hired a servant just to turn on the lights. Big Steve returns. He is the only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms in office. McKinley was the 3rd president to be assassinated. He was killed by an anarchist while attending an exhibition in New York City. The shooter had wrapped a handkerchief around his right hand to conceal the weapon and approached the president for a handshake. When McKinley extended his hand, the man shot him twice. With the assassination of President McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt took his place and became the youngest president in the nation's history at 42 years old. Like his predecessor, he was also shot while giving a speech, but fortunately he survived. The only president bigger than Big Steve was President William Howard Taft, who weighed a massive 330 pounds. Taft was the first to adopt the White House's fleet from horse-drawn carriages to motor vehicles, a relief for the poor horses. Woodrow Wilson was the only U.S. president to hold a Ph.D. He is known for his crucial role in the negotiations that ended World War I. However, Wilson was also a supporter of racial resegregation and was responsible for implementing laws that separated black people from whites in the federal government. Warren G. Harding was a journalist before entering politics. During his presidency, his administration was plagued by corruption scandals. President Coolidge, also known as Silence Call, holds the record for saying the fewest words of any president. Once, when his wife challenged him to say nothing at a dinner party, he leaned in and whispered, "I bet I'd stay quiet." He won the best. Hoover was president during the Great Depression, one of the most devastating economic crises in U.S. history. Herbert and his wife spoke Chinese and often communicated in that language when they wanted to have private conversations in the White House. Roosevelt was the only president to serve more than 2 terms, completing a total of 4. He led the country through most of World War II from a wheelchair after contracting polio. Less than 3 months into office, Truman made the controversial decision to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan. His presidency saw the beginning of the Cold War and the Truman Doctrine, which committed the United States to supporting nations threatened by communism. Eisenhower was a 5-star Army general and commander of the Allied forces during World War II. During his presidency, NASA was created. He loved helicopters and suggested using them to replace limousines for his short trip to the White House. John F. Kennedy is one of the most iconic presidents in U.S. history. His presidency was short, as he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. His charisma and leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis made him a figure that endures in American memory. Johnson was a strong advocate for civil rights and ending racial segregation in public places. He is also remembered for his role in the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon is best known for the Watergate scandal, which led to his resignation in 1974. He was the only president to resign from office, and was also the first president to visit China, marking the beginning of a new era and relation between the two countries. An interesting fact about Ford is that he was the target of 2 assassination attempts, both in 1975, both in California, and both by women. He was the only person in U.S. history to become president and vice president without being elected to either office. Carter's presidency was marked by escalating economic problems. Inflation and unemployment increased dramatically while gasoline prices skyrocketed. The situation became so dire that people had to wait in line for hours just to get gas for their cars. Ronald Reagan was a Hollywood actor before becoming a politician. He appeared in a total of 53 films over his 30 years acting career. He was also famous for decreasing taxes for high-income individuals. George Bush was a man of many achievements. In addition to his presidency, he was of the youngest pilots in the U.S. Navy. He also ran a very successful oil business, was ambassador to the United Nations, and even became director of the CIA. Bill was president during a period of economic prosperity. His presidency was marked by the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which led to his impeachment for perjury and obstruction of justice. However, he was acquitted by the Senate and completed his second term. The younger Bush is known for 2 things: Afghanistan and Iraq. Historians say his legacy is still being determined, but many claim he intervened in both nations for the benefit of the United States. What do you think? The first African American president of the United States, Obama, is best known for leading the operation that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden. He is also remembered for his charismatic pitches. Donald Trump is a businessman and television personality. His administration was marked by controversial policies and a tough stance on immigration. Joe Biden? Well, he loved chocolate chip ice cream, that is for sure.